What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today, now that the Flash has officially ended, I'm going to be explaining the Reverse Flash's entire timeline. So yeah, guys, I just figured that I'd make a fully updated version of this video. So yeah, with that said, let's go ahead and get right into it. So yeah, guys, let's just go ahead and start from the beginning. So Eobard Thawne was born in 2151, and we know that because of the season 1 finale when Thawne said he was born 136 years from that moment, and at the time it was 2015. So of course Thawne grows up to be a scientist, and he begins working at the Flash Museum as a result of his interest in the Flash, and in fact, he admires the Flash and becomes determined to give himself speed just like the Flash so he can be a hero as well. We'll say Thawne does this in the year 2190 or so he'd be in his late 30s most likely. So it ends up working. Thawne grants himself speed, and at first he's just like any other speedster connected to the normal Speed Force. So now he can do what he's always dreamed of. He can be the Flash of the future. But then on the day he's been, looking forward to for so many years, the day Thawne reveals himself to the world as the next Flash, the next speedster hero, the actual Flash shows up in the future for whatever reason. We were never told why the Flash goes to the future. But yeah, Thawne was going to save a crowd of people as his first exploit as a hero. But the Flash would steal his thunder and save the crowd instead, which is what starts Thawne's hatred for the Flash. Now, just for fun, we could say that in this event there was some crime that Thawne created himself and that he planned on stopping, saving the people himself. But then Barry comes in and saves the people instead. The only reason I say that is because in the comics, that's what Thawne initially does when he starts out as a hero. He creates crimes himself and stops them himself, and gets all the praise for it. And the Flash stops him from doing that, and that's sort of how their rivalry gets started in the comics. So I'm not saying that's what happens in the show's timeline. I just thought I'd mention that, because that's what happens with Thawne in the comics. Anyways, Thawne's hatred for the Flash begins to grow, and he starts to experiment with his powers a little bit. He ends up discovering his ability to time travel, and through time travel, he figures out he's not meant to be the next Flash. He's not meant to be a hero. He's meant to become the Flash's worst enemy, the Reverse Flash. We know that this happens because Thawne said this when explaining more of his origin to Barry in Season 2, Episode 11. Also, sometime around this point, Thawne studies the Speed Force in order to find out how to make his own Speed Force, that of course being the negative Speed Force. Now, we also know that Thawne initially had no idea when the Flash was from. That must have been, that information must have been erased by the Flash Museum in the future. So that said, Thawne in his now yellow suit starts time traveling to find out when the Flash is from so he can then figure out the Flash's identity. So this is when we see Thawne in Season 2, Episode 11 of The Flash, where he travels to 2016 and finally figures out when the Flash is from. Now, this version of Thawne is actually technically the youngest version we ever see. He's probably somewhere in his early to mid 40s at this time. Now, something I find interesting is that in the start of Season 2, Episode 11, when he figures out when the Flash is from, he then says, "Now let's find a way to get home," and then proceeds to have Dr. Tina McGee build him a time machine. But when the Flash stops him from doing that, he still needs help going home, as the Flash helps him to do that after they realize keeping Thawne here is disrupting the timeline. Now, with that in mind, I've always wondered why Thawne couldn't just run back to the future like he presumably ran back to the past. But what if he just had some help running to the past as well? Something like the cosmic treadmill could have helped him, and that's how he's traveled back to 2016 here in Season 2, Episode 11. This could confirm that Thawne actually worked at the Flash Museum on the show, as obviously we know that, from the Godspeed storyline in Season 7, that the cosmic treadmill is at the Flash Museum and can be used for time travel purposes. Now, obviously, this Thawne here in Season 2, Episode 11 is from the original timeline, whereas the Flash from 2016 is from the timeline after Thawne kills Barry's mother, so it's like two timelines coexisting to create one whole different timeline. Here, I'll just let Harry explain it.
But since Thawne is from the future, this is where his timeline begins. This Thawne has not yet traveled back in time to kill Barry's mother.
And speaking of Harry, aka Earth 2 Harrison Wells, this episode is when Thawne is reminded of Harrison Wells, who must be a big name in the time he's from, as obviously Thawne, we know from Season 1, Episode 17, I believe it was, Thawne does know who Harrison Wells is. Obviously, Thawne right here has no idea that he would ever take over the body of Harrison Wells, but nonetheless, it's a name for Thawne to now keep in the back of his mind. Anyways, after Thawne is thrown back into the future, we can assume that he fights the original timeline Flash a few more times, probably probably across different times, until one day in 2024, the Flash and Reverse Flash meet each other on a street. The Flash comes with the Justice League, and Reverse Flash comes with an army of shadow demons. This, of course, is the fight that the iconic Flash Missing Vanishes in Crisis article is referring to, and at some point, maybe during this fight or before this fight, Reverse Flash ends up figuring out the identity of the Flash as Barry Allen. Now, at some point, Reverse Flash travels back in time to March 18th, 2000, with the goal of killing Barry as a child. Now, this is where I think the timeline we all know and the original timeline start to connect a little bit. Of course, originally, Thawne and Barry come out of a portal in the year 2000 and right away go into Barry's house, and Thawne would eventually kill Barry's mother. But for this video, just so it's all connected, we're going to have the events of Season 9, Episode 10 of The Flash take place instead of how it originally went. So this would mean that technically there's a change to the original timeline. I know that's crazy, but technically there is. Originally, Thawne goes back in time and Barry follows him, and Thawne instantly kills Barry's mother within minutes of time traveling. This time around, Thawne goes back in time, and original timeline Barry does not follow, and Thawne travels back to, the same day still, March 18th, 2000, but much earlier in the day, which means this time in the original timeline, Thawne must have been more patient and traveled back to 2000 when original Barry wouldn't know about it, and original Barry wouldn't be able to sense him time traveling either, because Thawne has his own speed force, and we know from Season 5 that Barry can't sense the speedsters time traveling with the negative speed force. So anyways, eventually Thawne makes his move and attempts to kill Barry as a child while he's in an epic speedster battle with the Flash, just like we've seen for countless years watching the show. Now, when Barry saves his younger self, Thawne, of course, kills Barry's mother, thinking there wouldn't be a Flash in the future if he experienced a tragedy like that. Now, Nora's death is a fixed point, meaning the timeline will always have her be killed by the Reverse Flash one way or another. So now that there isn't an original timeline anymore, our Season 9 Barry should have never gone back to that night, because the version that originally went back was a different Barry from the original timeline, a timeline where his parents are alive and he gets his speed on a different date, presumably 2020. But since Nora's death is a fixed point, we see Barry go back from Season 9 to that night, and he takes the place of original timeline Flash. So essentially, Barry's mother's death will always happen no matter how different it may be compared to the original night that it happened. So that right there is, I guess, the Barry situation with all that stuff. Barry wouldn't know that he wouldn't be erased from existence if Thawne killed his mother, because he knows that Thawne would, get stuck in the past and would need to create the Flash in order to get home. So yeah, essentially, when Thawne goes back to March 18th, 2000, in his eyes, he'd still think Season 9 Barry is original timeline Flash, aka, of course, Thawne would still be from the original timeline, but this wouldn't be the original timeline version of Barry's mother's death, if that makes sense. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that the Thawne that goes back to that night will always be from the original timeline, no matter the circumstance, because they're not just going to have a Thawne at that night that's already killed Barry's mother. That wouldn't make any sense. So anyways, like I said, after Thawne loses his speed and realizes that he's stuck in the year 2000 after Barry disappears, he realizes his only way back is the Flash, so he's going to need to create him. And how does he do that? He takes over the body of Harrison Wells and embarks on what was once Wells' dream and makes it his own dream. And that, of course, is building and being the CEO of Star Labs. So then starting in 2013, of course, Thawne builds the particle accelerator with the ultimate goal of giving Barry speed. And it works with Barry being struck by lightning and becoming the Flash. So Thawne then helps Barry in the form of Harrison Wells, pretending to be handicapped just to, for sympathy, but also he's, charging himself with a power source inside the chair. Anyways, Harrison Wells obviously pretending to be his ally, just so Barry would get fast enough to open a time portal for Thawne, or Wells, whoever you want to call him, to return to the future. So then when Thawne reveals himself to Barry as the Reverse Flash, he tells Barry that if he gives Thawne what he wants, that being a way for Thawne to get back to the future, he'll give Barry the chance to go back in time and save his mother. So Barry opens this time portal that sends Barry back in time and would have sent Thawne back to the future, but of course Barry comes back not having saved his mother, instead just comforting her as she dies, and he stops Thawne before he can go home. Then the Flash and the Reverse Flash have a battle, and Thawne is just about to kill Barry. That is, until Eddie Thawne, Reverse Flash's ancestor, kills himself, thus erasing Reverse Flash from existence, at least so we thought. But now let's go into Season 2, or the end of Season 2, with Barry creating Flashpoint, where he of course stops the Reverse Flash from killing his mother. He pulls original Reverse Flash from that moment in time and holds him captive in the new Flashpoint timeline where both of Barry's parents are alive. But then when Barry realizes that he's made a huge mistake by saving his mother, he asks Thawne to kill her again, and he does, which makes the timeline go back to how it was, with no Season 2 Barry being there, and with Thawne killing Barry's mother. Now, with that said, that should have been it for Thawne, now that the timeline had been restored and original Reverse Flash was back stuck in the year 2000 and not pulled from his rightful place in the timeline. That should have erased Flashpoint Reverse Flash, as Flashpoint didn't exist anymore. But it did not erase him. Flashpoint Reverse Flash is a time remnant, and he just brought Barry back to his house, and then he goes off to Legends of Tomorrow to team up with Malcolm Merlyn and Damian Dark to form the Legion of Doom. But that's why Black Flash is chasing Thawne throughout Season 2 of Legends of Tomorrow. This Thawne is a time remnant that isn't supposed to exist. Anyways, on Legends of Tomorrow, eventually the Black Flash does kill Reverse Flash, or I guess erase him from the timeline, or, so we think, because he returns in Season 7 of Legends of Tomorrow, as he says that he was saved by the Time Wraiths after Black Flash killed him, and he was sentenced to protect one of the fixed points for all eternity, and was also stripped of his speed. Now, this version of Thawne dies again, but then in the Flash Season 8, he presumably returns. This time, he of course lost his memories and was a good guy for once. Now, it wasn't exactly confirmed that this Thawne is the Flashpoint / Legends of Tomorrow version of Thawne, but that's the theory that Barry and Team Flash came up with in Season 8, so that's what we're going to have to go off of. Their theory was that the Time Wraiths saved him again, and the reason he was brought back was to be there for Mina Dawin, which is kind of a weird reason to bring someone back from the dead, but nonetheless, apparently that's what's happening here. But moving away from the Flashpoint / Legends of Tomorrow version of Thawne, in Season 4 of The Flash, and specifically the Crisis on Earth X crossover, we see the Reverse Flash return, this time in the face of Harrison Wells once again. Now keep in mind, guys, Season 4 Reverse Flash is the version that was erased from existence in Season 1 after Eddie Thawne killed himself, so in other words, he has nothing to do with the version of Thawne that we see in Flashpoint or Legends of Tomorrow. This is a completely different version of Reverse Flash. Anyways, all he says in Season 4 in regard to how he's alive is that time travel is responsible for it. Now, obviously we know that Eddie Thawne is brought back to life in Season 9, but like I said, that happens after we see Reverse Flash in Season 4, so we're going to rule out Eddie being alive again as to why Reverse Flash is alive again in Season 4, especially because Reverse Flash didn't have anything to do with bringing Eddie Thawne back to life. But how else exactly could Season 1 Wells Reverse Flash be brought back to life in Season 4? The only explanation I can think of is that he's alive again because of the negative Speed Force. We know from Season 5 that the negative Speed Force is immune to timeline changes, so maybe Thawne's connection to it, or him being inside of it, made it so that he's also immune to timeline changes, and that's how he's back in Season 4. So in Season 4, Barry just let Thawne run off, and then we next see him in Season 5, where he runs a 2034 for whatever reason, and somehow gets imprisoned. It's still unclear how he ended up in prison. Maybe he temporarily lost his speed again or something like that, but nonetheless, he's in prison for another 15 years until one day in 2049 when Nora West Allen, aka Barry's daughter, comes to visit him. Now, when Thawne sees the Flash's daughter and learns that she's helping Barry defeat Cicada in the past, that being, I believe it was 2019, he starts thinking of a master plan to escape prison, especially now that he knows who Cicada is and knows who Nora West Allen is, all thanks to when Barry and Nora time traveled back to the Flash Season 1 and talked to Thawne when he was pretending to be pretending to be the Flash's ally. And now here in 2049, he uses that information to his advantage as he does escape, as we find out that Thawne has Cicada's dagger strapped to his chest, and that's what's been keeping him in prison for those 15 years. All he needed was for Nora and Team Flash to destroy Cicada's dagger in the past, thus erasing it in the future, which would let Thawne go free, and exactly that happens. So Thawne just runs off to end Season 5, and the next time we see him is in Season 6, but he's formless at first, and he's just negative Speed Force tachyons. The reason for this is likely due to some change in Crisis on Infinite Earths. Maybe when the multiverse was destroyed, the antimatter wave also turned Thawne into negative Speed Force tachyons, but not killing him, maybe because he was already in the negative Speed Force at the time or something like that. I'm not really sure, but nonetheless, Thawne is formless in Season 6, so Thawne takes over Nash Wells, but eventually they get Thawne's negative negative Speed Force tachyons out of Nash Wells, and we're told that Thawne isn't dead, but he's just back to being formless and would one day take over someone else. So then the next time we see Thawne is in Season 7, when he was brought back to life in the body of Wells once again by Speed Force Nora, who got in touch with the negative Speed Force to do so. So Thawne is brought back to life in order to help Barry fight Godspeed, and he does, as he almost kills Godspeed, but then Thawne turns on Barry the second that he got the chance to do so. But we can see here that Barry is clearly much faster than Thawne, and Thawne realizes this as Barry just throws him across the pavement, which leads Thawne to say that he's going to get faster, but then he runs off again. So yeah, we see Thawne next to start off in Season 8 in the Armageddon crossover, where Thawne kills Joe, wears Barry's face to make Barry seem like a villain, and just overall makes Barry go insane. So then Barry runs into the future to see this supposed Armageddon, and to see who has been making him think that he's crazy, and when Barry time travels, that is when the whole timeline changes and bends to Thawne's master plan. Thawne essentially steals Barry's life. He made sure that he got struck by lightning in 2013 instead of Barry, and became the Flash. He's about to marry Iris as well instead of Barry marrying her. He also makes Barry the Reverse Flash, as Thawne calls this his reverse flashpoint. Now, also in this timeline, Reverse Flash did what he originally set out to do. He kills Barry as a child, which makes Barry begin to fade away from the timeline, but then Barry is able to time travel and correct Thawne's Reverse Flashpoint, so everything is back to normal, but Thawne still returns in present day, this time as the Reverse Flash, but now he's the one being erased from existence. So with that said, Thawne asks Barry for his help so he doesn't get erased from the timeline, and Barry removes his powers, which somehow saves him from being erased from existence, but also that severs Thawne's connection to the negative Speed Force, which plays a role in Thawne returning later in Season 8. So now Thawne is locked up in prison until Negative Dion pays him a visit and kills him, or so we think. But then we find out that the Wells version of Thawne will return if a certain sacrifice is made, which turned out to be Iris, as Barry throws a lightning bolt at the negative forces, but Dion makes Iris, or Negative Dion makes Iris appear in front of the lightning bolt, and Barry, I guess you could say Barry kills Iris, or again, so we thought. And Iris's body turns into negative still force particles, and then those particles go into the good version of Thawne, the one that was revived from Flashpoint and Legends, and now his body has been taken over by the Wells version of Thawne, who now has his speed back once again, thanks to Dion and the negative forces. So eventually Thawne becomes the negative Reverse Flash in his kind of ugly black costume. But then as the Flash and Reverse Flash fight, Thawne takes in too much negative Speed Force power, and that allows Barry to use the Still Force to erase him from existence, once again, rightfully so. So we then see the Wells version of Reverse Flash again in Season 9, specifically the Season 9 finale, and obviously we know Zoom was pulled from the timeline into the negative Speed Force right before he was about to die and turn into the Black Flash, so we're also assuming that's what happens for each of the villains that return, like Savitar, Godspeed, obviously including Reverse Flash. I would assume that they pulled Thawne from right before he gets his black suit, because obviously he was wearing his yellow suit in the Season 9 finale, and when he was in the black suit, he was all souped up on negative forces, and he obviously wasn't, in the Flash's season, he obviously wasn't souped up on negative forces in the Flash's Season 9 finale. But yeah, after he was defeated in this episode, it looked like Cobalt Blue just absorbed Thawne's and the other villains' negative energy, which must mean that they were sent back to their rightful place in the timeline, which for Thawne would be at the end of Season 8. I guess you could also say that the blue crystal just simply brought back illusions of these villains and didn't actually pull them from the timeline, but then you have, the whole thing with Zoom where it looked like he was pulled from the timeline right before he's about to die, so I think we're going to go with that. But yeah, that is basically it for Reverse Flash's timeline. But anyways, I'd say that's about it, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure to comment your thoughts on this video down below, as well as your thoughts on Reverse Flash's timeline. Would you guys add anything to it? Do you think I missed something? Just comment any of that stuff down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.